God, our Creator, you make every person in your divine image. Break down barriers that separate and create opportunities where everyone can fully share their gifts and talents. Empower us to pursue a future in which people with disabilities can reach their full potential. As we embrace human weakness, help us rely upon your strength. Amen. Many pervasive phrases use physical disability to describe undesirable states. Terms like blind to the truth, blind spot, and falling on deaf ears equate sensory impairments with a lack of awareness, denial, or willful neglect. Blindness can be used in a positive way. For example, he sees the truth when others with physical sight are blind to it. The word lame is frequently used as a metaphor for something boring, uninteresting, or a lame excuse means weak or unacceptable. Phrases such as crippled by fear, crippling poverty, or the system is crippled link physical disability to a state of being broken or unable to function. Aging guarantees everyone eventually faces some physical or mental disability. Nearly half of individuals aged 60 and over worldwide are disabled in some way. Injury and illness cause temporary disability, but any person can be disabled by an environment that doesn't meet their needs. Most people will encounter environmental obstacles at some point in their lives. People without an impairment can be handicapped by their surroundings. For example, a parent with a stroller is hindered by a lack of ramps, just as a wheelchair user is. Some biblical figures, such as Moses, Jacob, and Paul, experienced disabilities. Moses had a speech impediment described in the Bible as slow of speech. Initially, Moses used it as an excuse to avoid God's call. Eventually, Moses coped by accepting Aaron as a helper. Moses also relied on God to, quote, teach him what to say. Jacob had a permanent limp caused by wrestling with an angel. His physical disability reminded him of his holy encounter. It led him to rely daily on God's strength rather than on his own deceitful schemes. Paul had an unnamed thorn in the flesh. He begged God to remove it 3 times. After being told, my grace is sufficient, he began to boast about his weakness. Paul came to believe that God's power was perfected through the weakness. The biblical narratives often challenge societal stigmas of the time. Jesus explicitly stated that a man's blindness was not due to sin. Instead, he indicated that it was an opportunity for God's work to be displayed. God often chose weak and lowly individuals to accomplish major tasks. This demonstrates that disability does not disqualify someone from divine work. The Bible highlights allies like Aaron, David, and Sarah. They provided practical support and dignity to those with disabilities. Moses, Paul, and Samson are often cited as figures who had learning difficulties. Moses repeatedly expressed that he was unskilled and not eloquent. Scholars suggest that he was less fluent in Hebrew after living 40 years in Midian. Rather than remove the impediment, God provided Aaron to speak on Moses' behalf. Moses eventually developed his own, quote, hidden power of his words. He used short, powerful prayers to lead effectively. Paul was highly educated, but the thorn in his flesh plagued him. Some speculate that the thorn was failing eyesight. If so, this condition may have impacted his ability to write and to study. Paul relied on others to write down his thoughts. Samson exhibited traits consistent with autism. This affected his social interactions and decision-making. His behavior was often impulsive and socially detached. His strength was tied to his spiritual vow. He struggled throughout his life with the consequences of his impulsive actions. I started with biblical figures who had disabilities to offer encouragement. Moses, Paul, Samson, and others are better known for their accomplishments. God relies upon individuals with human limitations to do great things. There are all kinds of disabilities, and some create significant barriers. Unaddressed, disabilities often lead to poorer long-term outcomes. They include lower graduation rates and reduced employment opportunities. Educators have addressed student disabilities using personalized strategies. The methods foster inclusion, allow access, and offer accommodation. Research shows these efforts lead to significant improvements. Academic success and good outcomes result from high fidelity and personalized focus. Key findings highlight that early intervention and inclusive practices are among the most effective drivers of success. Research indicates that school-based efforts directly influence a student's trajectory after graduation. Inclusion and work-based learning opportunities are strong predictors of competitive integrated employment and individual living in adulthood. Several saints struggled with what modern scholars describe as learning disabilities, intellectual difficulties, or neurodivergence. These individuals often faced ridicule, academic failure, and rejection before their holiness and unique gifts were realized. Neurodivergence is a non-medical umbrella term describing people whose brain functions learn and process information differently than what is considered typical. It is a natural form of human diversity, covering autism, ADHD, dyslexia, and others. Emphasis is placed on unique strengths rather than just deficits. Neurodivergence is estimated to affect as many as 20% of the population. Biographies of St. Joseph of Cupertino describe him as slow, absent-minded, and clumsy. Modern scholars suggest that he had ADHD, a learning disability, or autism. Joseph turned to intensive prayer and humility, by honestly facing his disability. He passed his exams by studying what he knew would certainly be asked. He was known for his mystical ecstasies and humility. He emphasized prayer, obedience, and surrender to God's will. Joseph of Cupertino is the patron of students. He had an amazing spiritual focus that overcame self-will through grace and simplicity. Witnesses describe him as the flying saint because he was able to levitate during Mass. This was sometimes triggered by a shout or intense emotional state. St. John Vianney struggled severely with academics. Teachers considered him, quote, too slow, or, quote, an academic failure. John relied on private tutoring, extreme diligence, and prayer. He was ultimately ordained because of his profound personal devotion rather than any academic merit or success. John Vianney's greatest contribution was the spiritual transformation of the parish that he served in Ars, France. Through tireless pastoral work, radical personal holiness, and most notably spending 12 to 16 hours a day listening in the confessional to people, their problems and their sins, he became a model priest. His dedication turned a neglected village into a renowned pilgrimage site for spiritual renewal and healing. At age 14, St. Bernadette was unable to read, count, or memorize. As a nun, her mother superior once called her good for nothing. Bernadette's inability to invent or understand complex concepts helped to verify that the visions she had of the Virgin Mary were indeed authentic. St. Sergius struggled significantly with reading and communication. He is considered a helper of those with learning and reading differences. St. Torlak is a proposed patron saint of autism. He became a bishop and is the official patron saint of Iceland. Thorlak was a child prodigy who taught himself to read at a young age. His rapid academic and spiritual progress led to an early church career. He was ordained as a deacon before age 15 and became a priest at 18. Modern researchers identified several traits in his life consistent with autism. He was noted for his failure to initiate or reply to social interactions. He was described as reticent, quiet, and easily overwhelmed by large groups. He exhibited a strong preference for ritualized daily routines, strict adherence to rules, and an unbending black and white moral dichotomy. Contemporary accounts describe him as physically weak and a poor public speaker with a lifelong speech impediment that made preaching difficult. Studies show that individuals with learning disabilities often use a variety of behavioral, cognitive, and technological strategies to hide their challenges. The process is sometimes referred to as masking. While these strategies help them blend into neurotypical environments, They frequently lead to significant emotional and psychological distress, including burnout, anxiety, and feeling of worthlessness. Some individuals wear the class clown to divert attention from academic struggles. Others may act uninterested or claim that tasks like reading are boring to hide their difficulties. Recent advocacy emphasizes the importance of unmasking. This involves gradually letting go of the behaviors used to hide neurodivergent traits. This journey often starts in safe settings, such as peer circles or with understanding therapists, where individuals can experiment with being their authentic selves without fear of judgment. Unmasking can be a healing process, but often involves grieving the years spent hiding and the missed support during that time. Classical artists often depicted disability to symbolize suffering, moral failings, or existential torment. Pieter Bruegel the Elder painted the blind leading the blind in 1568. It symbolizes spiritual blindness. He often depicted disabled people to represent social decay. The painting serves as a moralizing, allegorical warning against blindly following incompetent leadership, religious corruption, or false doctrines. In 1642, The Clubfoot by Giuseppe de Ribera features a boy with a deformity. Yet Ribera portrays him with a complex mix of sympathy and suffering. In doing so, the artist highlights a desperate beggar figure. The boy holds a note that reads, "Give me alms for the love of God." Ribera's intention was to dignify a disabled beggar. He portrayed him with the confidence of a ruler rather than an object of pity. Using dramatic realism, Ribera highlights the boy's resilience and humanity. Diego Velázquez offered realistic court portraits showing court fools or dwarves. These symbolizes the deformed body either as a foil to royal power or as a symbol of tragic, marginalized existence. In 1645, he painted Sebastian de Mora to dignify, humanize, and validate the existence of the court jester, elevating him beyond the typical demeaning stereotype of a pet or mere entertainment. The portrait captures de Mora's intelligent, direct gaze, challenging contemporary views on class and humanity. The painting was a protest against the social humiliation many faced as property of the court. Before the 19th century, self-starvation was primarily viewed through a spiritual lens. Saints were admired for their miraculous ability to survive without food, a theme often captured in medieval and Renaissance iconography. It wasn't until 1873 that physicians like Charles Lesage and Sir William Gall formally named and medicalized the condition, shifting it from a spiritual feat to a psychological disorder. Several contemporary artists have portrayed anorexia and eating disorders in their work. They often use their work as a form of expression, recovery, or to raise awareness. In the 19th century, Sir William Whittingall used clinical photographs and drawings of paintings to document the physical transition from extreme emaciation to recovery. Elsie Paquette created a series in 1993, including Eating the Heart Out, The Anger Within, and Protecting the Heart. The images explore her 11-year struggle with anorexia. Anna Hoover produced a series of paintings titled The Art of Recovery, illustrating different stages of her personal experience with an eating disorder. Another artist used self-portraits to document her long battle with severe anorexia, aiming to show the reality of the disease. Effective learning experiences are typically structured around 4 interactive components: engagement, practice, feedback, and application. Active involvement and motivation ensure the learner is invested. Repeated application of new skills solidifies and transfers knowledge to long-term memory. Timely and specific information on performance helps refine skills and identifies areas for improvement. And using knowledge in real-world contexts makes abstract concepts more concrete and sticky. Core learning elements interface with advice from spiritual masters. Spiritual masters often adapt standard learning mechanics into specific practices for wisdom acquisition. The pursuit of wisdom is likened to a miner searching for hidden treasures. It requires deliberate effort and the guidance of those further along the path. The focus is on 4 practices: attention and observation, memory and recording, curiosity and questioning, and practice and application. A closing prayer. Lord, help me see my journey through the light of your Beatitudes. When I am poor in spirit or overwhelmed by my limitations, remind me that the kingdom of heaven is mine. When I mourn the abilities I have lost or never had, comfort me with your presence. Grant me a meek heart to accept my path, knowing I will inherit the earth through your grace. As I hunger and thirst for a body and mind made whole, satisfy me with your peace. Teach me to be merciful to myself and others, and keep my heart pure, so that I may truly see you in every struggle. Amen. There is available a series of questions for personal reflection and journaling, and or for group discussions, which you may request by emailing to the address at the bottom of the screen a request for the questions on disabilities.